Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and this is My Life as a Landlord. I'm so pleased you joined me for today's show in Educating Yourself. As many of you may recall, I live on Maui and am very proud to be a longtime resident and community contributor on Maui. Michael and I do our absolute best to contribute housing to the Maui community and beyond. My guest today has a bigger, wider perspective on housing. I can't wait to talk to my friend Kate, who is the County of Maui Planning Director. Kate Blystone is here to educate us and update us on the Lahaina recovery and much more. Thanks for being here, Kate.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jen.
Yay. So this is so funny because you and I've been friends for a while and you're a planner. And so I instantly go, she's an intellect like me. My audience, the listeners are intellects, they nerd out. So tell us, what is a planner? Like, what is that?
Sure. I think that's a great question to start with. I mean, because when I was growing up, it's not like planner was among the jobs that was listed for me, right? Like there was, doctor, lawyer, like all of those kind of firemen,
Astronaut.
astronaut, right? I was going to be a radio astronomer for a while because of Jodie Foster. But a planner is really a person who is managing change. So communities are dynamic. They constantly change, they constantly grow, and we're constantly getting new population and people want bigger houses or smaller houses where their lives change. And the job of the planner is to manage that change, to look 20, 50, 100 years down the road and say, what's the community we want to create? And work with the community that's existing at that time to figure out how to get there. And so the planner, I come from a long range planning background, so I look at the long-term future. A lot of my colleagues are regulators and they look at the code that we've created to create that long-term future that we're going for and apply it in real time. So now as the planning director, my job is to do all of those things at the same time, which is super fun for me.
Long range vision and then day to day
Yeah.
crises, I guess. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So when you decided to become a planner, first of all, how come you didn't become a doctor or a lawyer? You just decided to become a planner. You like change, being a change agent?
Here's the thing. I don't think it's like engineers. If anyone's interacted with engineers, they're a special kind of person.
I'm an engineer.
Yeah, yes. They're not, I think planners are kind of born, like you have an instinct to go for this. So I don't really think that I chose planning as a profession. Planning kind of chose me. I was studying to be a journalist. In fact, I wanted to be an environmental journalist. And I got my first job in planning at my friend's consulting firm. He's like, I need an assistant planner. I was like, sure, right on. I need a job. So let's do that together. And and then I just started doing more of that and less of journalism. And then eventually I was like, hey, I think this might be a career. Is there like another degree in this? And so I went and got my master's in urban and regional planning. And I've worked in the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector. But really what appealed to me about planning as a profession is that I grew up in the country. I grew up in rural Eastern Washington, south of Spokane, and we would drive to town. People who have country vibes know what driving to town feels like. And so we would drive to town. And I always remember as I was growing up that I would come back from town and everyone had security lights on their property, like a big light on a pole. And those lights kept multiplying. And so, it used to be really dark and black, all the way home once we left the town limits. But slowly I saw our farmland being eaten up by, these little, McMansions, larger homes that were being occupied by one or two people. And it made me incredibly sad as I was growing up that all of my farmland was being taken away. And when I saw what planning could do, I was like, this is a way to manage growth. Like this is a way to go, let's be intentional about what we're doing. And so, yeah, that's how I fell into it and why I stayed in it is because I see it as the best way to kind of live my ethos, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you go from farmland in Washington State to Maui, Hawaii? How did you do that leap?
Well,
How did you get here?
it's a great question. So I went to Western Washington University for my undergraduate degree in Bellingham, Washington. And one of my roommates, one of my good friends early on, he wasn't a roommate, but he was roommates with my roommate, with friends of mine. And so we hung out, and he was born and raised here on Maui. And we became best friends. Like we became very, very close and ended up living together for a really long time. And so I was back and forth to Maui quite a bit when I was in college. And a part of me always kind of wanted to be in Hawaii. And so when I realized that I really wanted to be here about 10 years before I came. So in about 2008, I was like, I want to be in Hawaii. And I'm like, but I am not worthy of Hawaii. So I spent a ton of time reading and researching and trying to understand the context of this place. And I even took Hawaii, which is the Hawaiian language course, because I knew I couldn't come here as a planner and say things like Keapalua and Kihai, mispronouncing place names for those of you who are not familiar with those places. So it's not appropriate for a planner to be that not wise about the space. So I took my time. And then when the 10 years passed, I didn't set 10 years. It's just, I ran out of patience with the weather 10 years into it. And I said, okay, I'm going to put myself out there. And I put applications out to all the islands, to private, nonprofit, and public sector. And Maui picked me. And so that's how I ended up in Maui. And I think that's true. People who come here will say that the island picks you. And certainly was true in my case.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So the island picked you, and
Yeah.
here you are today as the planning director. So connect that step, because I kind of get how it's all gotten here. Now Maui's picked you, but bring us to today even more.
Sure. So, back when I started being a planner, I was a baby planner back in the
A baby plan.
2001. Yeah. So anyone who's a new planner, I call them baby planners because I was a baby planner in 2001, and I worked my way up of my career, right? So I had been a director for a nonprofit organization, so I had that background and experience. But when I came to Maui, I was a senior planner because I'd had 20 years of experience in the field, and that was the right fit for me. And then I left the county and went to go work in the private sector here. And it wasn't really a good fit for me, but I did run into a client with Hawaii Community Foundation. In fact, I'm sitting in Hawaii Community Foundation's office today. So I was their project manager when I was working in the private sector. And I really just only wanted to work on that project. Like I didn't want to work on anything else that I was doing. And so they had an opening at exactly doing what I was doing. And I was like, I'm going to apply for this. And so when the fire happened, I was working for Hawaii Community Foundation, which for your listeners who were paying attention to what was going on in Maui, Maui Strong Fund is the fund that came out of Hawaii Community Foundation. So our first work was to do that. And then one day I went to the wrong meeting with my boss, and the managing director for the county of Maui said, Kate, so good to see you again. And I was like, great to see you, Josiah. And he says, I hear you're interested in coming back to the county. And I said, that is not true. where did that come from? And that started the conversation, and he asked me to come back. He and the mayor asked me to come back and be the director of the planning department, which is something I struggled with because I had never thought of that as my career path. I kind of let go because it's a lot of responsibility and it's exhausting. It didn't feel like I want what I wanted to do, but I felt like I could help. And so I said yes. And here I am today, a little more than a year into it. So a year and a half almost. Yeah. It's a
Wow.
long walk.
Long walk. Well, I've been a part of Maui United Way for a long, long time. Coming up 5.5 years, I've been on their board. And so when August 8th, 2023 happened and the fires occurred, and of course I knew you from Hawaii Community Foundation, and I instantly just thought, oh my goodness, just heartbroken, not only for Lahaina, but Kula as well, right? There were multiple losses, no loss of life, thankfully, in Kula. So I don't want to forget about Kula.
Mm,
Lahaina,
mm,
Lahaina was more concerning for me because it was so close to the shoreline. And so that was instantly my thought was all of our favorite restaurants like Chemo's and the Yacht Club and Cheeseburger in Paradise and all these places. And I went, oh my gosh, they're all in the SMA special management area in coastal zone management, which is federally regulated, but it's locally, I guess, run. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, the day of the fires, you're still at Hawaii Community Foundation. What was your immediate thoughts other than the trauma that we all felt? What was your thoughts about that?
I'll be honest, I had shifted my focus so much to housing. And so immediate, first of all, my immediate concern was for the people that I knew and loved in Lahaina, because when I was working at the county, I was part of the team that did the West Maui Community Plan. And so I was familiar, I had walked those streets physically and with through mapping for hours and hours. Like I knew that place inside and out. I knew every parcel. And to just think about it being gone, even to this day, I remarked yesterday to a friend, I said, I saw some drone footage and I was like, I still can't believe it happened. So I'm sure you feel that way as well. Like there's this belief that I could just go there tomorrow and it's fine, but it's definitely not fine. So dealing with that was not a small thing to start with. But my head was really in housing people. So we already had about a 10,000, roughly, I mean, it's a little more than that. It depends on who's counting, right? Around a 10,000 unit shortage. So we had people, double, triple, quadruple up in homes across Hawaii, across Maui. And then in addition to that, we had people living on the hidden homeless, people just crashing on people's couches and all of this. And so I knew we had this housing shortage, and then we lost like 2,000 units and displaced 12,000 people. That's an
Overnight.
astonishing number of human beings. And we didn't have the infrastructure in place to just pop up new houses, right? We're in the middle of the ocean out here. And so it's not like FEMA was going to put their usual trailers on a barge and get us here. We had to figure out a situation. So my focus was on getting housing. And I jumped on at it for the Hawaii Community Foundation. I jumped on the Housing Recovery Support Function, or RSF. And so working with the state and the feds to try to get people housed as much as possible. Meanwhile, we're just getting peppered with questions from nonprofits who are looking to be funded to do some housing work. And the infrastructure side of things was, just like and when I say infrastructure, I mean like the permitting infrastructure for temporary housing wasn't real yet. And so we had to design all of this stuff from scratch. And so I helped as much as I could from the outside, but then when this opportunity came in, then my head shifted into the SMA and the shoreline. And because we had old shoreline rules, but we had halfway adopted new shoreline rules that were better and based on science. And so we were kind of in this middle zone. And then we had to figure out, well, if we adopt these new shoreline rules, is that good for recovery or is that bad for recovery? So we had to analyze that. And when I left, it was not just me. When I started, it was not just me that was starting. Also, we had a new deputy too. So all of us were coming into this fresh. And we're dealing with a staff who's been under the gun, working really, really hard. My predecessor in this position was as the director, lost her home in the fire, her home of 30 years in this fire. And so she was working so hard at both things, like at being a survivor and being the director. And so we had to get some grounding and figure out what direction we were headed before we could just jump in the canoe and paddle. So that's really where my head was at, was making sure we were making the right decisions for the next 100 years, not just the expedient, we need to rebuild immediately. It was like, okay, but how, yes, and how do we rebuild with resiliency? How do we think about this in the context of the longer term picture? So that, and one other thing I'll add is that as the director, I was co-lead for the recovery. So I went from the housing recovery support function to the community planning recovery support function, who was responsible for building the long-term recovery plan. So immediately we went from housing everybody to going like, okay, now we're thinking about the future. And then we got to get people to think about how they want their community to look going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Long answer to your question.
No, and it's perfect. That's exactly what the context is, and this is exactly why I wanted you on the show. I mean, you and
Yeah.
I have had lots of conversations over coffees and teas, and I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure People are asking questions. You see every once in a while we get an update on YouTube. There's several people who fly drones or walk around, and now Lahaina, Front Street, and other locations, they're more open, and so people can go down and visit. But
Yeah.
it's like a bad dream. And it's like, I mean, I'm going to Lahaina later today for a chamber function, and it's sort of like when you make that last turn on the bypass and you go down towards the Lahaina Cannery Mall, it's like you just wish that you looked out and I wish I couldn't see the banyan tree because
Yeah.
the wharf used to block it. And then the first time we went over there and I looked over and I could see the tree or what was left of the tree. And I went, I could never see that before because all the buildings were in the way and now the buildings are all gone. I mean,
Yeah.
all those kinds of
Yeah.
like immediate traumas were like, oh my gosh, it really, really is gone. And
Yes.
yeah, so then that's the next question. You and I both know there's temporary building permits, there's FEMA housing, there's all state housing, all kinds
Yep.
of things in motion that Michael and I have contributed as much as we possibly can to all of that. But what people want to know is where are we at right now with this rebuild of both Kula and Lahaina? But
Yeah.
Lahaina's more, I think, more pulls at the heartstrings of people because it was so well traveled by the tourists. But where are we with the rebuild?
Yeah, so I can speak more to Lahaina than I can to Kula,
Of
and I'll
course,
explain why. It's not because I don't care about Kula, because I very much do care about Kula.
of course.
But my focus, even though it's the planning department, we're not like Honolulu where we have building as part of our work. So when we do permitting, we're only looking at the shoreline and the SMA, but we're
Mhm.
also looking at across the island, not just in the SMA, but and the shoreline, but looking at zoning. So to the extent that we are responsible for applying the zoning regulations, we've been involved in the cooler rebuild, but my focus has been on Lahaina. And so as far as where we are, there's a really great website that I think you can put in your show notes. I think that's a thing.
Sure.
So we have a website, our Lahaina Recovers like recovery website has a dashboard on it now that shows where we are exactly with permitting. And I can't remember, I feel like there's been 19 something last time I checked, 19 that were done. We've got 300 or 400 some in process and 300 or 400 some done but not built, if that makes sense. So we're making pretty incredible progress moving forward. Once we worked out all of those kinks, we got some forward progress, which is great. That's inside and outside the SMA. We've been able to move forward on some projects in the SMA due to the emergency proclamation that the governor signed, and then we refined a little bit. So if you were rebuilding like for like, then we're able to just say, yeah, you're good, you can go forward. If you are doing something bigger or significantly bigger, significantly different, there's some thresholds, and I will not bore your listeners with all of the little tiny manini details. But there's some thresholds that you got to meet in order to go through the process much more quickly. But we're also really mindful of the historic district because as you know, we have the National Historic Landmark District in this space. And so, we're trying to, and even though it's gone, it's not gone. It's still Lahaina. And in a way, with this rebuild, we're going to be able to get back some of the history we lost. So one of the projects that's within the long-term recovery plan is the restoration of Moku'ula and Loko Mokuhinia, which are this is incredible royal complex area that, my colleague describes it as it's going to be a national park in the middle of Lahaina, which is pretty rad. So we're going to be able to get that cultural history that was lost when we focused just on the whaling era and in the plantation era in the historic district. So that's kind of an exciting aspect of the work that we're doing. And that project's kicking off right now, along with another one that's within the Rebuild Lahaina, or in the long-term recovery plan, is the Rebuild Lahaina plan. And part of the Rebuild Lahaina plan is taking a look at the way our streets move, the way people move through our communities, building, creating cross sections, roads cross sections that are appropriate for Lahaina. So new street standards for Lahaina, so that we don't lose all the things that were rad about Lahaina in the rebuild because we have street design standards that don't match that. So we're getting us new street design standards, which I'm really excited about. and then also too, some design standards for the commercial district. And so we're going to work with we have some of the best consultants. I'm so excited. I really feel like this is our dream team. We're working with Opticoast Design, which is, the leader on missing middle housing. So I'm sure we're going to get back to housing in a minute. But we're also working with, and they're excellent, just an urban design firm. And then we're working with Spec Dempsey, and Jeff Speck literally wrote the book on walkable cities. It's called Walkable Cities. And I've been told that it is the best-selling urban planning book of the century so far. So that's exciting. So anyway, that team is helping us with the mobility plan. And in addition to that, we also have Bionic working with us on the landscaping, landscape design, so that we can see that flow from Moku'ula, like all of the plant and the green and the restoration of that space flowing into the core of Lahaina, the commercial district. So there's more connectivity across our history. So I'm really excited. As terrible as it is, I mean, going back to where we started here, which is that this is awful what happened to us. This is awful what happened to that community. And we're going to have an opportunity to do better in the future. And so, yeah, planning's excited to be the department. We're all excited to be part of that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you straight up, will Front Street ever look like it did?
So I think there's a couple ways to answer that question, but the short answer is absolutely not. I mean, it can't, mostly because and it's not about regulation. It's about how it evolved over time, right? So that place evolved to be what it was over decades and hundreds of years, in fact, right? So some of the things that made it what it was, we'll never be able to get back. But will it be the same? No. Will it be better? Yes, definitely. As a result of the work that we're doing with the community, with the property owners, with our public works department, it'll be a place that people want to go. And one of the things we heard during the long-term recovery plan process is that people did want certain things to go back the same, but they also said that Front Street wasn't working. Local people were saying Front Street wasn't working for them. So we have to address that in the rebuild. And I think we've got the right team assembled along with the community to make that happen. Yeah.
Amazing. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some recent changes with the shoreline management, special management area. I know that the governor has been working very closely with County of Maui and the mayor, and there were some recent changes about the applicability of coastal zone staff for Lahaina. Can you fill us in on what that looks like and how that will impact the rebuild?
Yeah, without getting too wonky.
Yeah, don't get too wonky.
Sure. Well, so one thing we realized, whether we did I mentioned that we were adopting new shoreline rules, and so when we did that, we discussed how that would apply and what that would look like, because the new shoreline rules include the erosion hazard line. So this is where we think the shoreline is going to be based on modeling, and in some cases it goes really far, Mauka, or for your Canadian listeners, upland.
Towards the mountain,
or US, continental US. So upland. So it goes much further in than the regular shoreline was. I mean, the previous standard was. And so, we took a deep look at how that would apply in Lahaina, and ultimately our own mayor took a look and said, actually we want to adjust the shoreline. So the governor's proclamation adjusts some of the rules so that folks that are out of harm's way and are protected by Front Street, which has a lot of infrastructure in it, are going to be able to rebuild more quickly, are rebuilding more quickly. Shorelines, though, are very sensitive areas. And I'm not talking about environment, like even if you don't believe, like you don't care about the environment, which I do, and I think you do as well.
I do.
If you don't care about the environment, you should care about your stuff, right? So we want to analyze these projects that are on the shoreline more critically. So you want to look at those more critically and make sure they're sited out of harm's way, that they're thoughtful about what impact they have to the marine environment, and also what the marine environment will have on them, what impact it'll have on them. And so we've been, so that still leaves quite a bit of development along the shoreline that is going to have to go through our Maui Planning Commission process. You probably overwater is another. We had a bunch of things, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, that were at least restaurants and places that had some portion of their projects overwater. That is outside of the county's hands. Those are, so anything that's overwater is the responsibility of the state. And the process for that is really rigorous, even more rigorous. People complain about our processes, but the state's process is really rigorous for good reason, right? Because these are public lands and they need to be thoughtful about how they're going to lease them, because these are, the overwater piece is a lease from the state.
Mm.
So they'll have to go get new leases. And in cases where structures were destroyed over water, they had a lease. If they had a lease already, that lease expired as a result of
Mm.
the fire. So they'll have to go get new leases in a lot of cases. I mean, everyone is a little different. And the one thing I will say, like really early on when I started, um, folks were like, Kate, you need to do a meeting. We need to do a meeting about how to rebuild in the shoreline. And I was like, no, because we can't, because
No.
I was like, no, thank you. And because we couldn't, because every individual property has different circumstances. So where the line applies to you, where you want to put your stuff, all of that has an impact on what your permitting path is. And so
Mm.
what we ended up doing, I'm really proud. I want to do a shout out to the planners in the shoreline team, because those guys met one-on-one with anyone who was any shoreline property owner who wanted to talk through how the rules applied to them. They met one-on-one, and they didn't just explain the rules. They said, these are the risks too of rebuilding in
Oh.
this space. And so what we're trying to do is give, so there's a path for everybody. And so we're trying to give everyone their path, but also to the county, and not the planning department, but the greater county as a whole is looking at potential buyouts. So if people are like, you know what, this path is
Mm.
too much for me, I would like to sell my property, there's that option as well. And so that's being run through the greater county, not through planning. Can't do everything. I know that there's a desire for us to do everything. We can't. So yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. There's so many heartstrings with these fires because Lahaina was so well traveled and such a really there was really a connection with people worldwide. I mean, just really incredible. And the one story, because I'm a sailor, the
Mhm.
Lahaina Yacht Club, when it burned, when they were
Sure.
permitted to go back in, they went and found the bell in the
Yeah.
surf. And so they have, I mean, that just tears me up because,
Sure.
right? And so I know their lease is now expired, but now, I mean, sailors are solution finders. And so
Yeah.
I'm really curious. Now they have the bell, they have the spirit, they probably have money.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
some point they're going to rebuild, but what does that look like? But that's one aspect of this whole tragedy, is that you have the phoenix rising from the ashes, and
Mhm.
stories like this, and also there's incredible stories too. I want to just bring one thing up. When Lahaina was burning and there was no power on the west side for days, there were so many amazing human beings on Molokai who were going and getting deer and literally putting them on their boats and bringing them to Lahaina and going, here, Ohana, eat. Because I mean,
Yeah.
these people had nothing. They had nothing.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, that's the kind of stuff where it's like, my family, my friends are starving. I'm going to feed them. And they do it. They figure it out. I mean, I would I'm not sure that's going to happen when we're going to talk about the LA fires next. I bet that
Right.
didn't happen in LA. I bet they didn't run up to San Francisco and
Yeah.
kill a deer and bring it down to LA. I mean, you know what I mean? But
Would
this
be
is,
weird, but
it would
yes,
be weird.
I
It would
hear
be
what you're
weird.
saying.
But
But let
but
me, can I add to that? Because I
yeah.
just, I want to yes and you here, because one of the things that I think that we discovered through the long-term recovery planning process, when we were gathering, we had 900 people physically participate in our workshops, right? And they
Including
came,
me.
including you. And
Including me.
what we said was, what we learned through that process, and we knew instinctively, but we also needed to see it, was that Lahaina is not about the stuff.
Mm-mm.
It's not
At
about
all.
the stuff, it's about the people. And Maui is about the people, right? Like so working for Hawaii Community Foundation, no one came to our office before the fire, but every day after the fire, someone was knocking on our door with a check. Some visitor who loved Maui would come and give us a check and say, hey, I don't know, this may not be anything, but I can't. And people would send us boxes of stuff, like boxes of things. And it just, our front lobby was full. The love for this place from within and without is remarkable. And that's why I think like other places who have faced this kind of disasters, and I know we're pivoting to LA, their recovery is motivated by different things. Our recovery is motivated by love, by aloha. And so I feel like that is why we're going to succeed. It may take a little longer because we're in the middle of the ocean and things are harder, but that's why we're going to succeed.
Ah, I love it. Okay, well,
Yeah.
we've been talking about the parallels with the loss in Los Angeles. Let's go there. I mean, the fires earlier in 2025. There's got to be some parallels. I'm assuming that you're talking with other folks, other planners who you're either guiding them, helping them, learning from them, all of the above. What lessons from Lahaina can you apply? Can you help with the folks in LA recover?
Yeah. So we're a little down the road for them. And so I think they are already doing some of the things that I would recommend. One of the biggest ones was I was really concerned when we started this process about all the outsiders. I'm an outsider myself, so that seems really strange to say. But all these new people coming in. In fact, one of our mutual friends, Luke, showed up to a meeting one day. I'm like, who the heck is this guy? Like, what is he doing here? How does he have any? Like, why? Like,
Why?
I was really upset about these outsiders. But these people are really coming to help. They know they know what this is like, and they've done it in other places. So specifically, I'd say throw your arms open to FEMA, especially FEMA community assistance. Those guys are the ones who help us with the long-term recovery plan. There is nothing, we could have done none of what we did without them. And in fact, when our long-term recovery plan was done, HUD said, this is the model. This is how you should do it everywhere. And I was like, yes, like, yes, it is. We did a
That's
great job.
awesome. Yeah,
But
it
we did a
is.
great job because of FEMA, because we had their help, because we had their support. We had a lot of internal support, but all of us, we were broken. And FEMA
Yeah.
came in and put their arms around us and said, it's going to be okay. We know what to do. We're going to help you. And they didn't ever push. They didn't ever make us do anything we didn't want to do. They always were there to support us. And then the EPA is another example of folks who came in here and just cleaned up along with their colleagues in the Army Corps of Engineers. In fact, one of our good friends from the Army Corps of Engineers is now running the recovery in LA. And so you already are in good hands. Like with that guy, Colonel Swenson is taking care of that work for you guys. And they're moving so much faster than we ever did. Because I hear from my colleagues over there with the debris removal, because they have all these resources and stuff. Use those resources. That would be my advice. Use those resources, but also don't lose track of the fact that you've experienced a trauma. The LA community has. We feel things deeply here in Hawaii. So do you. You just
Right.
may not realize it until you're well down the line. And whether you're a survivor or a planner or an engineer or anyone working on this project, take a deep breath every now and again and remind yourself that this is hard, and it's okay to be stressed out, and it's okay to take a break every now and again. It's not, no one's going to hold that against you. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you gotta save your energy so that you can be there for your community, so that you can be there for your family. All of those things are really important. So those are the things that I would say to my colleagues in LA. I would also say that, like, I spoke with the director for LA County early on in the process, and they know what they're doing. They have their stuff. They've been through this before in different ways, and so but this is harder. This is bigger. This is a lot more. And so just be patient with yourself. Be patient with your community, because they're not going to show up exactly like you would expect them to in a normal circumstance. So trauma-informed engagement is really important. So if you're engaging this work, get trauma informed so that you're coming at it you're meeting people really where they are. I mean, just imagine one day everything around you that everything that you love is gone. Now
Mhm.
imagine, like, really do that. Really sit and close your eyes and imagine that. And then think about what it's like to engage with the world. And so that's who you're engaging with, is all these people who've lost everything. They're not going to come at you with their happiest, most joyful, most thoughtful, visionary energy. They're going to come at you with, oh my God, my world fell apart. And so being there for them, it's really important to come at them from a trauma-informed lens.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's see. I looked up the website that you mentioned, MauiRecovers.com, to track the Lahaina and Kula recovery, and it's got so much on here. So long-term recovery plan. So it's talking about all this. It's talking about building permits issued, building permits
Yeah.
processed. Then 260 are under construction, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And then you can sign up for updates, which I will do as well.
Yeah.
Really, really pretty high speed website. Pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
So
Pretty
listeners can
slick.
check out, yeah, listeners can check out that, which is great. Um, let's see. One of the things that we do at the end of each episode, Kate, is I draw a call to action. And when people ask me, where do they start learning about permitting in the state of Hawaii, not just on Maui? I usually say start with the book Regulating Paradise. It talks a lot about coastal zone management and the different districts of the state and zoning and how it all works on Maui and the other counties as well. But that's not the only perspective. What would you recommend?
Oh, there's a ton of books. I mean, I think that's a good one for the wonky folks to figure out kind of the
I'm wonky.
structure. Yeah, like me. It's a good one. But I tend to look at the core, like the back, like even further back. So really get educated about how we got to regulating paradise, like how we got to the structure that we have. You got to go back and read about Hawaii's history. So Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen, by Queen Liliuokalani. To check that out. Wonderful story. Not a wonderful story, terrible story, but like wonderful context building for you. Land and Power in Hawaii is an excellent book as well. I would say there are a ton of books that are about sovereignty and about, like the Native Hawaiian perspective, and I would gravitate towards those. Specifically From a Native Daughter is a great one. And Jen, I'll send you a couple others for your show notes if you like. They're just not coming to
Sure.
me off the top of my head. But all of the stories that are written by local people here really give you a sense. No one thing is exactly perfectly right, but all of them give you a sense of the perspectives that are available, just like the book that you mentioned, Regulating Paradise. That's one perspective. But water, anything about water too, because water really constrains and forces us to think more critically about how we develop here in Hawaii. So I would look at any of the books that are related to water as well. There's a ton out there. So yeah, I'll give you some to put in your show notes, and then nerds can go find them.
I love it.
Yeah.
Kate, we've talked about so much today. I know you and I could talk a ton more, but any parting thoughts?
No, I'm really excited that I had this opportunity to talk with you. You and I have been talking about doing this for a really long time, and to have this opportunity to talk about the work that we're doing in Lahaina is incredible. So mahalo to you, mahalo nui loa for that. And I think the big thing for your listeners is, I imagine a lot of them are not in Hawaii. And when you come here, I want you to be mindful of what you've heard from me today, of the trauma that we're going through in Maui, but also of your impact on this space. And so anytime I get an opportunity to talk to a broader audience, I'm like, think about being a good visitor. Think about what you can do to educate yourself about this place before you come, and then take a look at how you can be helpful while you're here. There's some incredible nonprofits that offer volunteer days and stuff. Take advantage of those. Get out there, work the land with Hawaii Land Trust, for example, or go pet a cat at the Humane Society. Do something good for the community while you're here, and pretend like you're part of it. Pretend like you live here a little bit, and I think you'll have a more better more better experience here.
Oh, better.
More better. But yeah, and then also just keep Lahaina in your heart and in your thoughts. We could use all the support that we can get. Both Lahaina and Kula. Maui needs your support. So thank you so much.
Perfect. And listeners, if you want to donate, you certainly can do so at Maui Strong, but also Maui United Way. I have to put that in there as well.
Yes,
So,
you got to plug Maui
yes, of
United Way as
course. Of course.
well.
Excellent. Kate, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. It was a pleasure.